It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today we're going to talk about Invoice Ninja. Now this is one that several of you have asked me about over the past few years, and I just haven't done it. I've put it off. I did Crater Invoice, I did Solid Invoice before that, and Crater has worked for me really great, but unfortunately the project has been abandoned. They are no longer doing any active development on it, and it's gotten to a point where it's kind of broken for me. So I had to find something to replace it, so Invoice Ninja looked like the best option that's out there for me right now. And I thought, okay, it's time for me to get this thing done and installed. And I did initially have a lot of issues the first few times I tried it, but this last time I was able to work through it and kind of figure it out, and their instructions have gotten much better. So really, we're going to be following their tutorial here about how to do this and what things you need in order to get everything ready and installed, which is pretty straightforward. It gives you all the commands you're going to need, and I'll kind of talk about what it's doing in the background while we're getting it set up, what you'll need out of the box. And in the show notes, I will have the instructions on how to get all of this set up, but I'm going to kind of move through the first part, which is you need Docker and Docker Compose in order to install this the way that I'm going to do it. Now, if you're one of those folks that's like, no, I want to install it straight up on my hardware, you can do that. And they have instructions on how to do that on their main GitHub repo and on their pages. But for me, Docker and Docker Compose is a great way to run applications because it's a very lightweight way to create a container for this system and have it separated from the rest of my operating system and easily removed, easily backed up, everything like that. Docker has a ton of advantages, and I think people don't give it a fair shot a lot of times. But we're going to go through the Docker and Docker Compose setup for Invoice Ninja today, and I'll show you all the little things that you need to know about what's getting set up and where and why. And I'll help you make sure you get everything set up to be the most secure that it can be. One of the other things that I'm going to do, and you might want to do but you don't have to, is I'm also going to set it up with a domain name so that I can access it from anywhere using a reverse proxy to get to my Invoice Ninja install no matter where I'm at. But it also gives my clients the ability to download their invoices or view their invoices online as I send those out through the email that I'm going to set up. So we're going to need a few things. We're going to need Docker and Docker Compose installed. I'm going to use Nginx Proxy Manager, which is a reverse proxy. You can use traffic, you can use whatever you want to, honestly. But we need a reverse proxy so that people can actually get to our Invoice Ninja install since we're putting this on our home lab. We're going to need an email SMTP server that we can use. Now, if you're using Gmail, that's fine, but you need to know how to set up the Gmail SMTP server. I'm not going to go through that, but I will show you what values you need if you're running your own SMTP server like I am. And then we're also going to get SSL set up so that everything is nice and secure. There's nothing going over the internet that's not encrypted, especially when you're dealing with finance and billing, things like that. It's very important. So we're going to get into all of the installation and all of the setup for it right after this. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really, truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. So I'll need to put everything that's going to be a Docker container inside of a Docker parent folder. So I'm just going to do cd Docker. If you don't already have this, you can create it with mkdir Docker. If you do this, it'll create a folder called Docker. Once you have that, you want to cd into Docker, which means change directory so that you're inside the Docker folder. You can see that right here. And then we need to clone down the Invoice Ninja Dockerfiles repository. So we'll go over to their instructions to do that. And if we just move down here, they've got the command right here for us. So we'll just copy that. And we'll go here and just paste it in with Control-Shift-V like Victor, or you can just do right-click and then paste if it's an option on your terminal emulator. We just cloned that. Now we're just going to cd. And what I want to do first is, what it did was, if we do an ls, you'll see there's a folder here called Dockerfiles. I don't like that name. It doesn't tell me what this is. So I'm going to just do an MV, which is move, but in this case we're using it like rename, and we're going to rename Dockerfiles to Invoice Ninja. And now if we do an ls, you'll see that we have Invoice Ninja here and Dockerfiles is gone. So now we'll just cd into Invoice Ninja. And if we do an ls, you can see there's quite a few files here. So things that we need to update and change. But first I want to make backups of the originals that we're going to change. So we're going to be changing two files. We're going to be changing the contents of the file called env, which is right here, and the contents of the file called dockercompose.yaml. So we're just going to do cp, which is copy. And we're going to copy env to a file called env.bak. It's just a backup file. We're going to do the same thing with the dockercompose.yaml. So we're going to do cp dockercompose.yaml to dockercompose.yaml, and we're going to do .bak. Now if we do an ls, we'll see we've got two extra files, each with a .bak extension, which is just our backup version of those files. So if we change something and later we need to go back, we've got the original as it was and we haven't lost that anywhere. So now we're going to edit a couple of these files, and first we're going to edit the env file. So we're going to do nano env, and in here there's a few things we need to change. So first is this app URL. So it has just kind of a local URL. If you want to do that, you can. If you know how to set up your local FQDN, your fully qualified domain name for your local network, great. If you just want to use an IP address for the server, you can put that in here as well. I'm going to put in an actual name for my server, so I'm just going to call this invoiceninja.routemehome.org. So I own the domain routemehome.org. I have an A record with a C name for Invoice Ninja that's going to point to my public IP address so that this will resolve correctly. So I've got everything set up here that I need. Now we need this key in a little bit and we'll get it, but we're not going to get it yet. I'll talk to you about it in just a minute. The app debug is set to true. I'm going to change this to false right here. Require HTTPS, you really should set this to true, but for now we'll leave it false so that we can just do a few testing things and we'll come back and change it at the end. The PDF generation I'm going to leave as false, and then I'm going to leave this as snap PDF and trusted proxies with a star, which means everything. We can get rid of that extra space, it's not necessary. We're going to leave that as database right there. Now down here we need to fill in our database details, and we actually need to fill them in twice. I wish they had just made this one set of database credentials and then used them in the Docker Compose in a little bit different way, but it's okay. So we're going to go here where it says a database name. We're going to change, well, Ninja is fine actually. We'll leave that as Ninja. For the username, I'm going to change this from Ninja. I don't want that. I'm going to change it to my name. You can set it to whatever you want. And for this one, we're going to make this just a random long set of numbers, letters, and uppercase letters. So we'll just start typing something like that. Something that's very long and very hard for somebody to ever guess or a computer to ever run through all of the variations that might be there. So you want something like that. Now we'll come back up to this in a minute, but we're going to copy this whole string that we just typed out right there to the end with Control-Shift-C. We can copy. And we're going to come down here, and you've got a couple of things you need to set. So this is going to be your login email and your login password for your system. So you want to set these to be very long, strong things. You don't want to use these defaults that they have set. So I'm going to set this as brian@fixitdelrio.com. That's my email. And again, I'm going to set a nice, long, strong password. So you would set up something like either a whole bunch of words that have nothing to do with each other, or just a long string like you have up there above. Either way, you can do whatever you want. You can use your password manager to generate it if you prefer to do that. But let's just think of a few words for something that we would like to have. So let's do controller, and let's do headphones, and let's do one more, carrying case 2. So in theory, this is a nice long strong password that a computer again would probably not ever just guess randomly. So now we're down to the SMTP section. So starting here at the server, you need to put in your server's SMTP information. So I'm going to put in box.fixitdelrio.com. On the port number, mine is 587. Yours might be different, so you need to know what that port number should be. For the username, we can put in something like mybills@fixit delrio.com. And for the password, you would put in whatever your password is. It should be some long, strong password that is hard to guess. Okay, now it should not be that, of course, but it should be something. For our mail encryption, in my case, it's TLS. You might have SSL, you might have TLS, you might have none, so you need to know what that is as well. And again, put in what this should be whenever it shows the from. In my case, my server won't allow it to be different from what the sender email is, so I'll put in my bills@fixitdelrio.com. And then here, whatever you want this to be for, like the kind of the subject, like the from name. So this would be billing, or I could put this as fixitdelrio billing. So the user knows who it's coming from and what it's for, and when they get the invoice, they understand why it's there. So on this last little section about the DB, this is again just the same DB information we already did, except this also has a root password set. So we want to go in here and actually set something kind of long and strong again. So you would make this again a nice set of random characters and numbers, and maybe not the commas. I don't know how well it handles that, but there we go. So we've got something nice and strong there. Here, again, for the user, we want to make this the same as above. So we want to have equals Brian. For the password, we're just going to paste in that password we copied from above. And then for the database, we left that as Ninja. Everything else here should be fine. We don't need to change anything else. We're just going to do a Control-O for now. Now, don't forget, we need to go back and get this app password that's up here at the top. I'm just going to hit Enter to confirm that. And so don't forget, we need to go get this this key right here, and we'll get that in just a little bit. We'll put that in here. But for now, we're good. We save it with Control-O and Enter, and then exit with Control-X. Next, we're going to do the Docker Compose file. So we're just going to do nano docker-compose.yml. And in here, you'll see a few things that we need to update as well. So we've got a couple of folders here that it sets, which is fine on the volumes. And this first section is setting up our Nginx web server. So this needs a web server in order for Invoice Ninja to run correctly. So right here, I already have port 80 in use, so I don't want to set it as port 80. So instead, I'm going to change this to port 8035 for this example. We'll leave this one commented out. We don't need it right now. And then this little extra hosts is really something you would use if, again, you're going to have some internal FQDN that you're using along with a public FQDN. I'm not doing that, so we can just remove these two lines. And I did that with Control-K to get rid of them. You can also just use the backspace, whichever you feel like. Next, we've got the Invoice Ninja image that's going to get pulled down. And here we can see, again, some volumes that are going to get set up. We can get rid of this extra line here. And then again, we can get rid of this extra hosts option. So just a couple of Control-Ks. And then we've got the DB that's going to get set up. Again, we're going to have the extra section here for the extra hosts we can just get rid of. And right here, they tell you a little bit about this part that's commented out that you might want to set up or you might not want to set up. It's kind of up to you whether you do or don't set those up. But this is for version 4, so we don't actually need all of this because we're going to get version 5. So we'll get rid of that and just get rid of that extra space. And down here is another setup that's really for version 4. It's not something we need for version 5, so we'll get rid of all these commented lines in this whole section right here. And now we've got everything that we need set up, which is great. If you're not using these sections and they're commented out and you're sure you're not going to need them, you can feel free to go ahead and get rid of them. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these because I do my backups in a different way. And we should have a pretty clean setup here. This is just information that's explaining what's happening with your ports. You can, again, get rid of it if you don't need it. And this cleans up your Docker Compose file a lot to help make it a little bit more readable. Really up to you if you want to get rid of those or leave them. It doesn't make that big of a difference in the end. We've got our ports set. We've got our volumes set. There's still some things we need to do, but we can save this with Control-O and Enter and Control-X. And now we'll go back to their instructions. And let's make sure we follow their instructions all the way through. So we did our setup of all these values. we do need to generate this key, and that's the next thing we're going to do. So they're going to tell us exactly what we have to do that. So we're just going to copy this command, and we're going to go here and do Control-Shift-V in our terminal, and this is going to pull down the Invoice Ninja image and then run it in a temporary spot. So you have to give it just a second to get everything pulled down and ready. But when it does, it's going to create that key that we need, and then we're going to copy that and go put it back into the env file. So it's very important for us to have that. The system won't let you log in or do anything if you don't have that application key. Alright, when you're done, you'll have a key like this one here close to the bottom. So we just want to highlight all of this, including the equal sign, all the way over through base 64. We'll do Control-Shift-C to copy that. And now we're going to do nano env. On this third line, we're going to get rid of everything inside the two angle brackets, including the angle brackets. We're going to do Control-Shift-V to paste in our key, and it should include the base 64 part right there. We're going to do Control-O again to save, and then Control-X to exit. And we've got a couple more steps we need to do here, so we're just going to keep going through their documentation. So they want us to change some permissions on this folder, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So we'll copy that and we'll paste it into our command line. And then we've got one more we need to do, so we're going to go back and we're going to copy this second one. And this one runs as super user, so make sure that your user you're using is a super user. You should not be doing this as root. But we'll copy this. We'll go back. Oops. Yeah, let's copy that. And then Control-Shift-V. And this is just going to change the ownership of this to be www-data. It's just set up as 1500, but that's what it's doing. So we'll put in our super user password here, and that's done. And I think the only thing left is, yeah, to bring up our Docker Compose file. So we're just going to go back to the terminal here, and we're going to do two commands. We're going to do Docker space compose logs-f, or no, up-d, and we're going to do two ampersands and docker space compose logs-f. So this first one's going to bring up our containers. It'll pull down the other images we need, bring them up as containers, and run them in the background in a detached method or as a daemon. And the second command says, show me the logs once you've brought them up so that I can see that everything's running like it should and watch for any issues. So we're just going to hit enter. And you'll see it starts the app one, but it goes ahead and now it's going to pull down MySQL and the Nginx containers and get those started so that everything's running. So if you watch, the first few times you'll see SQL Server connection refused, and it'll keep doing that because the SQL Server is still starting up while it's trying to connect. It'll just keep trying over and over until it finally connects. And you'll see once it does, you'll get all this output like we just saw that's saying, hey, we're creating the tables, we're doing all the things that need to happen in the background. So be patient while it runs. Yours might look a little more clean. I have the text blown up here for the people on the mobile devices to make it easier for them to see what's going on the screen. But it should run through all these steps, and at some point it will kind of slow down finally and kind of come to a stop like you see here. And you should see this info, success, scheduler running. We can just do a Control-C to stop looking at the logs. And now we can do a Docker Compose PS. And we should see that everything is up and that it's been up for a certain amount of time. So about a minute, about 55 seconds. So we see that everything's up and running, which is a good sign. That means we should be able to access our system now. At the IP address of our server with the port 8035. Remember, we changed that port. So we're going to go to 192.168.10.60. In my case, you want to go to the IP address of your server, of course. And that's 8035 after the colon. And here we are. So we're already at Invoice Ninja. This is a great start, but now we want to go and actually set up a reverse proxy so that we can get to our Invoice Ninja by the domain name that we set up. And then once we do that, we can go and set up some SSL certificates and make sure everything is nice and secure. So I'm going to close this real quick and we'll go do those other steps. Now that we've got everything installed and running, we want to set up our reverse proxy so that we can actually access our Invoice Ninja site through an actual URL, a domain name. So again, I own the domain routemehome.org. So I'm going to come into Nginx Proxy Manager. In this case, this is my reverse proxy software of choice. I'll blow this up a little bit for you, and I'm going to type in what we want, which is invoiceninja.routemehome.org. Just going to hit tab so that it makes this a little chip. You can see how the color changed in the background, and then I'm going to go down here to the IP address. So I want to put in the IP address of the server I installed it on, and then the port that we mapped, which was 8035. I'm going to tell it to block common exploits and WebSocket support. I'm just going to hit save. So before we do anything, we just want to make sure that that is working. So we can just open up another tab and type in Invoice Ninja. Make sure I type this right. invoiceninja.routemehome.org. And it should bring us to our login screen. And I added the dark reader extension here, so that's why this is all kind of nice and dark now. I'm trying not to give you guys a complete blindness if you happen to have the lights down when you're watching this video. So we've got that. That's great. It's going. It's loading up, and it's not. But it's not SSL certificate created yet. So we're gonna go do that. So I'm going to go down here to my Invoice Ninja entry. I'm going to go over here to the right. I'm going to click on the three dots and click on Edit. And right here, I'm just going to jump over to the SSL tab, and I'm going to tell it, request a new certificate, force SSL, which means if somebody tries to go to it on port 80, it will redirect them to port 443 for the HTTPS encrypted version. We're going to do HTTP2 support, HSTS for both of these things, and I'm going to agree to the Let's Encrypt Terms of Service here. I've got my email filled in, so I'm just going to hit Save. If everything works correctly, which means from the internet, Let's Encrypt can reach into my network and hit this service using the reverse proxy. It's going to assign me an SSL certificate, and what happens is that little pop-up just goes away with no error, nothing like that, and that usually tells you that it's done. So now we can just click on Invoice Ninja here, and it should take us out to Invoice Ninja. And yes, and we've got our lock, which means we've got a nice SSL certificate going, so we're doing everything encrypted now, which is what we want. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit just to make it easier for the people on the phones. And I'm going to type in the user that we created. And then I need that password that I created for this user. So if you remember, when we were in the actual terminal, we created a password as well. So if we do a cat env, we can just go up here and copy this password from the in_password. And you can Control-Shift-C in the terminal to copy. And then we can go back to our browser here, and we'll just Control-V that, where it pastes it in for us. And we're just going to hit, now you've got 2FA and some other things here, but these are optional, and right now we don't have that set up, so we're just going to hit Login. It's going to come up and ask you for some starter information, so your company name, so we can just call this Fix It Del Rio. The name of my IT company, and it's Fix IT Del Rio. Get it, fix it. So English is my language of choice, so I usually do speak English. Sometimes it's American. I apologize if you can't understand what I'm saying all the time, but I try to keep it as clear as possible. And I do use US dollars. So we're just going to hit Next, and you see it jumps us into the dashboard, and we've got a pretty clean interface, and now Invoice Ninja is up and running. A few things for you to go and try out initially are, you've got to do some setup for sure, but Invoice Ninja lets you do a lot, and this is some amazing open source software. So I do want to kind of talk about some of the things that we have here on the left. This is your dashboard, and again, I've got it zoomed in pretty good for you guys on the mobile devices, just to make it easier, so you can really zoom this out and see a much better view, but for our purposes, I'm going to zoom it in just so you can see what's going on. So here you get a nice little overview of what invoices, estimates, quotes, things like that you have out there. This will start creating a graph for your invoices for things that are outstanding versus things that are paid. Very, very similar to what we saw with Crater invoices. So one of the first things you'll want to do is go set up clients, and you want to put in as much information about your clients as you can. One of the things I suggest is creating a test client, because you want to have a test client with an email that's not your email that you're sending from, just so you can make sure the email functionality is working. You can create some test invoices and send those to your test client, and those should go to the email that you can check and make sure that you're receiving those emails. Sometimes the settings you have to set are not super clear from those env files that we use, and you need to go kind of look up in the documentation. Maybe you need start TLS, or you need something different that will help it start sending those emails correctly. You might have to go check on your email server to see, like, was this blocked for some reason or something like that. Sometimes you can get some log information that way too if you run your own email server. So highly recommend setting up a client that has just a test client, and then all of your other clients you can set up as well. Setting up a list of products is very important. Now, if you're a service-based industry, like an IT person, sometimes you have products, but sometimes you may have more like a monthly subscriber plan. That would also be a product. You're selling your service as a product in that case. So for me, for instance, I charge $250 a month, and I basically provide remote support through that, which means I can connect to them and do things remote. They also get 2 in-house quote unquote visits if I have to go down and actually do something physical per month. And then if it goes beyond that, I start charging them by the hour, because I have to actually go somewhere and leave, and I can't do other things while I'm working on their stuff, so it impacts my revenue. But maybe you have some hardware you sell, or maybe you have some other services that you sell. Maybe you have different hardware that people can buy to help them get connected to you. It just depends on what you might need or have, but this is where you would set up the products that you're selling, and it just makes it easier to add them to an invoice because they're already set up with their pricing and everything like that. This is where you just create invoices. This is actually like, just go here, click, and start creating your invoices. So you do want to have clients and products set up already. Now you can do on-the-fly products as well, but it's nice to have things kind of already set up with pricing if you need it. Even if you charge by the hour, if you say I charge $75 an hour for doing IT work, you can set that up as hourly IT work, $75, and then quantity is defaulted to 1, and then you can change the quantity and it'll just multiply out 75 times how many hours you worked on it. You can set up recurring invoices, which is super useful. So for my monthly contract customers, I can just set up a recurring invoice so that every month they get that invoice. I don't have to remember to go and send it to them. I can just have it go out automatically. They can get that and make sure I get paid. And it just makes it easier for me. And then I can go in and just do my bookkeeping to say, yep, they paid me here. I'll clear this invoice now. So payments, you can just mark and list payments, how you got paid, how much it was paid. That leaves how much is left on an invoice, or how much of a balance is left for that customer to pay you, and this tracks all of that for you, which is really great. It's a nice piece of software, and it does a lot of that kind of back end work for you, which can make it easier to run your business. The hardest thing about being a business owner is that you get into it because you love whatever you're trying to do as a business. And then you start to realize that as you get more successful, you become more of a business manager and not as much of a whatever you were doing. So if you enjoy doing IT, eventually if you get really successful, you may have to hire some people who get to go do the actual IT part that you really love, because you're the person that's keeping the books and making sure the business stays running and making sure that you're getting paid. So tools like this can make it much more enjoyable to do those things, even if it's things that you don't really want to do. Quotes, at least in most service-based industries, are really important. So people will call you and say, hey, we need a quote for this. You're going to build up your hardware list, how much that's going to cost, how much overhead you're going to put on that, how much labor it's going to take you, estimate the labor that it's going to take you to install it, get it set up, get it configured and ready to run, all those kind of things. And you can build a quote out and send that to them. And once they accept the quote, you can convert that to an estimate or to an invoice. And it's really nice to be able to do that, because it just saves, just says, hey, if you accept the quote, I'll convert this to an invoice, and you're done. And in the settings, you'll see there's places where you can set predetermined time frames. So this quote is valid for 30 days or 60 days. And after that, you'll have to get me to requote it because prices could have changed, things like that. Same way with estimates, same way with, invoices are expected to be paid in 30 net. In that 30 days, you'll pay me within 30 days, or else I'll start sending you reminders, and then we have to take other action, right? But hopefully most of your clients pay you on time. So if there's any credits that you're giving for discounts, for other things, maybe somebody's got a credit, that you owe them because they ordered some hardware that you got and you sent it back and they didn't want the other hardware you needed, so now you owe them a credit. You can list that here, and that keeps things nice and easy for you to balance out. The next time you send an invoice, you can just include that credit, and that pays part of that invoice for them. So projects is a special one. I think projects is an important piece of this. I would not say use this for project management itself, but what this is for is to help you track the costs of a project, the expenses that go along with running a project for somebody. So maybe somebody asks you to do a little bit bigger job than normal. You're not just coming down to install some RAM or upgrade a hard drive or run updates remotely or something like that. But instead, they say, you know, we need to redo our network completely. We'd like you to come in and run cable, set up new equipment, make sure we have Wi-Fi throughout the building, make sure we have different VLANs for our guests and things like that. And they won't use those terms with you, but you would know to use VLANs for their guests and things like that and segregate those things, you know, with a firewall. So you go through and you basically create a project for what it would take to do that, and you break that out into pieces so that they can see that and understand what those project milestones are and how much each of those things is going to cost. And you can say, you know, you can even set it up so that you can't have this part without, you know, this part. So you can't have part 4 without having done part 2. You don't have to have part 3, but you have to have part 2 if you want part 4, part 5, part 6. That way they're not going, well, we want to just do 4 and 5, but you realize, well, you can't do that without doing part 2. So you can set up those kind of things, and it's really important to be able to explain that to your customers, and this is a nice way to track those expenses. So tasks, things that need to get done, you can set up here as well, and what tasks are costing or how much you're going to be billing for those things. Vendors is another important one for you as a business owner, because as you're buying different things to provide to your clients, it's important for you to have vendors. And if you're trying to keep track of your expenses, maybe your internet service is an expense that you want to include in your books so that you understand how much you're spending on internet service, how much are you spending on renting a building, how much are you spending on gas and mileage, how much are you spending on all kinds of things. And having different vendors that you keep track of that information for can be really useful. So if you have a special vendor where you order RAM, maybe you only order from Newegg. If you order hard drives and you only order from, you know, Walmart or whatever, you can set them as a vendor and you can track what you're ordering from. And that way, if other people come in and you want them to start handling some of the ordering so you can get back to the IT work, they can look in here and see, who do you order RAM from? Oh, okay, I see it's Newegg. Let me go make that order. Purchase orders, it just depends on who you're working with as to whether or not they expect you to use purchase orders. I would say purchase orders are usually with, especially in the US or with government entities, are a huge thing still. They will create a purchase order, which means that you basically get the promise of payment once you've delivered your services, and usually there's terms involved with whatever it is. And then you can go and say, okay, I'm going to invoice you for this purchase order, and that lets them reference whatever it was so that they can say, oh yeah, we see that we were already setting money aside for this, we're ready to pay you, and they get you paid. Not my ideal way of doing things, but it's good for government because it helps them track where the money's going, and it helps it keep a little bit of transparency around what money's being set aside for and things like that too. Again, on your expenses side, you can just list all kinds of expenses here to help you understand where your money's going that you're bringing in as revenue. That's a huge part of business, is understanding, like, where in the heck is my money going? Like, I know I bring in a few $1,000s a month from this, but for some reason I don't ever have any money. Well, now you can try to figure out, where is it going? Same thing as recurring invoices. You've got recurring expenses. So if you know that every month you're going to have an expense of, you know, $295 for your internet service, you know, $1,000 for your building rent, you know, anywhere from $350 to $450 for your electricity, you know, those kind of things, right? So little recurring expenses you can list here, and especially if you have a set price every month that you know it's going to be, you can set that, and it makes it much easier for you to get that put in instead of having to put it in manually. Finally, there's different reports that you can run once you start getting data in here. Getting the data back out and making sense of it is very important. So being able to run these reports and use some of these filters is going to be super useful for you as well. Then we've got the settings, and this is a really important part that I don't always get to at the end, but I wanted to kind of wait till the end here because there's a lot of things that you want to set up. So you did some really basic setup when you started. You gave it your business name, you gave it the type of dollar, you know, the type of currency you use, and that was pretty much it. So now you really want to kind of go through and say, okay, what are the rest of the things that I need to fill in here? And you just need to go through and there's tabs going across for each of these vertical sections. So you want to go through each tab, fill those things out to the best of your ability. If you have a logo, put your logo in here and upload it. You know, do a few things that make it kind of your system, and then save. And then as you go down, so don't forget to save as you go. Then as you go down, you again, go through the tabs, fill everything out that you can. If you're not sure what it is, go look it up and find out what it is and see if you need to fill it out or if it can wait. Set up the different, permissions and things like that you want, or the different preferences. And again, save. But just keep clicking through all of your settings here, because these are really important for you to get set up on the system, make sure that it's working to the best of its ability for you. Now, you'll notice this button here. This is because they do sell a white labeled version of this. So if you want a fully white labeled version where it doesn't have anything about Invoice Ninja on it, you can pay them and get that set up. They have different pricing models for hosted systems as well, I believe, so you can go out there and kind of check that out. That supports them, that supports the open source nature of the software, but really and truly, out of what you're seeing here, there is a ton of functionality in this open source self-hostable software. So again, if you love something like this and you want to see it survive, supporting them in some way is really important, and it's really useful for you. Maybe you're just starting out and you're like, I don't have any money to pay them yet. Start here, but as your business grows and you start needing more, don't forget that, hey, you can go pay them and get a little bit more, and maybe even more help and support and things like that, where they can really help you out with this. So there's a lot of settings here that you should really click through. Make sure you understand everything that's going on here. Set up your system so that it works well for you. It's extremely important. I mean, there's just tons here, okay? And don't forget to look at the tabs as you go across, because there's just a lot of different things that you can set. A lot of the defaults make sense for probably most people, and that's why they set them that way. But you may have a special case where you're like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. I don't want to do that. So you need to go through and actually set it the way you want to see it. So here you can see some different setups for different how the reports will work. And this is just coming from their little Snap PDF creator. If you need better PDF creation or more powerful creation, you might need to go license a different piece of PDF software that they do support. But for now, I'd say try it with a Snap PDF creator, see how it does. And then if you're not getting a good success rate with it, you can always look at something different. So there you have it. That's Invoice Ninja. We got it set up, we got it installed, and we got everything up and running pretty quickly, pretty easily these days, which was great. I love to see that, and I love to see this product just continuing to move forward. It's been out there for quite a few years now, which gives me a lot of comfort thinking, it's going to be around for a while and I'll be able to use it for a while. So that's great. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the open source journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time. It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I've set up a store with a little bit of merchandise. I love being your open source advocate, but I want you guys to be the open source advocates with me. So if you want to, get out there and get some of this stuff. And if you do, let me know what you think of it. Thank you for subscribing.